Welcome to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams, where each fortnight you'll hear the stories of industry veterans and learn the secrets to sustainably amplifying value from your software platform investments.
So imagine this, your business has just been acquired. You have this immediate sense of nervousness and excitement as your brain explores all the possibilities. But once the dust settles, what does a merger or acquisition project look like, and what does it mean for your platform teams? Stay tuned to this episode of Platform Diaries to find out. Welcome once again, I'm your host, Shane Williams. Today's guest is Nadia Herriott, Separation Stream Lead at Trustpower. We explore how she came to be a platform owner and what she learned about platform ownership, how you adapt your plans and roadmaps so you continue to deliver value to stakeholders whilst also delivering your technology merger project, and some lessons on how to approach the people and change management aspects of a merger. I trust you'll enjoy the interview. So Nadia, thanks for joining me on Platform Diaries.
Thanks for having me.
We'll dive straight in. Obviously, you and I have been sharing stories and experience for a couple of years now, but for the benefit of people who haven't had the pleasure of knowing you for a while, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself? Perhaps start with your career, and I'm really interested to learn how you sort of move from a role in the Air Force to what you do now.
Yeah, it's been a fairly interesting journey. So I was probably not the most diligent teenager at school. Definitely not dumb, but probably not a whole lot of motivation. So I was interested in becoming a pilot, but broke my neck when I was 16, so ruled that out. But there's lots of other trades in the military. So when I left home at 17, joined the Air Force as a communications and information systems specialist and progressed from there over 5 years into a technician and then running our communications ops centre, talking to the aircraft and communicating to them when they're on missions. And that was a fantastic start to a career, sort of gave me an opportunity to grow slowly and figure out what I was interested in and who I was as an adult. But yeah, after 5 years, I sort of hit a little bit of a glass ceiling. It's quite traditional hierarchical management style in the military. So decided to spread my wings and travel overseas, which you could do at the time. And had heard about a great opportunity working on super yachts. So managed to get a job over in the Mediterranean working on a motor yacht there for the guy who invented Polly Pocket, which was really interesting, and spent sort of 2.5 years traveling largely through Asia and across into the Med, working for a variety of different billionaires. Gave me a fantastic perspective on life and an opportunity to reflect on what's really important. So that was super helpful in sort of setting my life view up a little bit more for, what I wanted and what I didn't want moving forward. Returned home and finished a degree that I'd half started while I was in the military, so business degree, and sort of condensed that as much as I could into a very short time frame. So managed to finish sort of 3/4 of a degree in a year. I think that they put limitations on young people these days that shouldn't exist, but that's another topic for another day. And then got a job working for Auckland Airport, looking after their passenger products. And that was my first probably proper corporate job. Spent 18 months there working on various projects, and then moved back home down to Tauranga, where I got my first job at Trustpower, looking after their Salesforce platform. And it was sort of quite an undervalued platform at the time. We'd had it for a long period of time. It had, all grown organically, lots of band-aids, probably not a lot of management or structure in place for how we look after it or how we maintain it. And then grew from there, started moving into the management space around campaign implementations, then took the platform ownership role with me for Salesforce, and then started to grow a team. So now, probably in the last 6 months, has been the biggest change, taking the skills that I've learnt and developed over the last 5 years and moving into a more program management space for our separation stream for the acquisition of our retail business for Trustpower.
That's awesome. And there's a couple of really interesting points I would love to dive into today. But before we do that, given that our audience may not be familiar with the New Zealand market, would you mind quickly describing what Trustpower is and what they do?
Yeah, so Trustpower is a gentailer or generation retailer in the New Zealand industry. So we've got large generation sites located throughout New Zealand, and also are a retailer of energy, broadband, and more recently mobile services. So we're one of sort of 5 quite large companies that are operated, and more recently have been acquired by one of the largest retailers. Our retail business, has been acquired by one of the larger retailers, Mercury. So we'll be merging in with their business over the coming months.
And that's probably a perfect segue into today's topic. But before we get into how an M&A relates to product and platform ownership, I wouldn't mind touching on something you said earlier and taking a little bit of a step back. And that is, you've had a pretty amazing journey, but in terms of business transformation and leading platforms that enable change and sort of the environment you described inheriting, can we go back to that and you could get you to tell me a little bit about your sort of first adventure into platform ownership, sort of how you became responsible for the platform and some of the challenges you faced?
Yeah, so I'm quite sort of passionate about it. I have always been a little bit of a geek, but once I sort of got my hands on Salesforce, it was my first sort of proper opportunity to take ownership of something and guide it in a way that I thought we could use it to best deliver to our business needs and really create value. And fundamentally coming from a position where my role was to understand the intricacies of the platform itself and using that to then learn and grow and define the things that we need to pay attention to as we try and, develop it to create a competitive advantage for our organization. Really balancing that is something that I think we had not been able to achieve previously because there hadn't been a big, there'd not been great advocacy for technical debt or making sure that there is adequate consideration for solution design and utilizing or leveraging the Salesforce roadmap to uncover new capabilities as they were released. And I think that that's probably the things that I saw that were easy for us to improve on or do better, and needing and desiring to have an internal team to help do that. Whilst I absolutely value the contribution of partners getting involved, having that internal capability to support and really understand, the context of the business utilization of the platform was really, really important upfront.
It's funny that the role you just described is exactly, if I was thinking about the persona I was writing my book for when I put it together, that's it, right? That's the that's the person I want to help.
Yeah.
And having lived almost exactly the same experience, I'd love to get you just dive into that a little bit. You talked about sort of advocacy for technical debt and the value of design. When you think back on how you turned that around in terms of getting that advocacy, what do you think your biggest lesson was?
We really needed to help our leaders get an understanding of, what the problem was and what not addressing the problem would result in. So, as much as we tried to be agile and develop and meet the evolving needs of our customers and leveraging these platforms, we ended up in a position where it was creating blockers for us because we had stretched the designs or, put plasters on the designs to such an extent that when we were trying to introduce new elements, we were compromising the reliability of the platform to deliver to those needs. And so getting visibility, helping create visibility of some of those challenges that we were facing as new initiatives came in was something that I think we could have done a lot easier had we sort of gone, okay, drawn a very simple picture, put it in front of the leaders in a way that sort of helped them understand that. The other thing I think we sort of learnt along the journey was that the involvement of the other areas of our technology business, so our Salesforce instance has always been looked after and run under a business unit rather than under our technology and delivery department. And that's been really helpful because the team that has been working on it has stayed really close to where the changes have needed, the team that we've been needing to deliver the changes for. But what that created for us was a barrier to all of the other frameworks and considerations for architecture that had been established as part of that technology team. So bringing the leaders and the managers of the rest of the technology department closer to the platform so that they could start to understand and appreciate the power and the capabilities that we could leverage if we worked together on that. Yeah, we definitely probably should have had them along on the journey with us rather than it being sort of a platform that was stood up over here doing that thing, because for a long time our Salesforce instance wasn't integrated in a sophisticated way. It was very sort of ad hoc, and I think that that's one of the major deliverables or the major changes that we've made over the last 18 months that's just transformed the way our business can operate.
Mate, those are two topics I'd love to dive into at some point on another podcast, because I reckon we could talk all day about that. But I will move further into the topic that we promised to talk about today, which is M&A and how that relates to platform. So to that end, perhaps let's fast forward today to your current role. And, I saw last month the Commerce Commission approved the sale of the retail business to Mercury. And I reckon that's pretty exciting. And I imagine for you it's pretty exciting. Sort of having been through several acquisition and divestiture projects, I know that can be both challenging and exciting. And I won't risk straying into business strategy that might put you at risk of getting into trouble. But I'd love to explore a little bit about how you're approaching that and if and how it's changed your platform strategy.
Yeah, so we're treating it like a merger, largely because the CEO of the organisation that has purchased the Trustpower retail business actually previously was the CEO of Trustpower, so he has a good understanding and has spent, I think, 7 or 8 years at Trustpower developing a really collaborative culture and a sense of shared responsibility within the employees. So in order to not deteriorate that over time due to, the sense of an acquisition taking place, the messaging was really clear around, we're not coming in to take over and get you to adhere to the ways of working or the things that are occurring at Mercury. It was very much like we're merging together. We're going to be two businesses working together, maybe, two brands running in parallel in the short term, and then let's see what the future brings. And with regards to the platform strategy, like we have had roadmaps in place that sort of saw where we could take our retail business and utilize different technologies in order to get us there. And we've had to sort of try to hone in on, what is our thinking around that, so that we can understand what we think our biggest value adds are in terms of what we can bring to the table once we get to the point that we can start having those discussions around platform strategy. So we acknowledge that there's going to be massive value on both sides of these organizations, that when we come together, we want to make sure that we can articulate and have really meaningful conversations to go, here's what we've explored and here's what we've done to date and here's what we think will work, works really well for us, and this is what we think doesn't work really well for us. How do you guys do that? What are you doing over there? Is there something that we can learn from you, that when we merge these two lots of thinking together, we develop something that we can create collaboratively moving forward to, serve one brand, serve two brands. We don't know what the future holds.
That's really interesting. I hadn't put together the fact that your CEO had previously worked at Trustpower, but it frames it up interestingly for me in that, because they see the value of the existing business, it sort of feels like it was very much, and I think you alluded to it, it's a merger, not a takeover, so to speak. And so, with anything like that, and you sort of started to talk about this a second ago, the fear that could be created by any change, let alone a acquisition or a merger. How has your CEO framed that up in terms of kind of the messaging around, what does it mean, and the approach in terms of, is it just get in quick and rip the Band-Aid off and get it done, or is it more about let's take our time, let's get it right?
Yeah, I think very much the latter. He's come in, one of his initial messages was, we acknowledge that this is going to be an opportunity for us to review our tech stacks, and in doing so, we don't want to necessarily approach it with an open checkbook, but we definitely want to approach it with an open mind. Like, let's acknowledge our previous thinking, but not necessarily come into it with closed minds or sitting on either side of the fence. We want to walk into a field where we can operate in with a sense of safety to go, actually, let's challenge ourselves to even our thinking that we will have when we get to walk into the room together. And I think that that's a sensational message for both parties to go, we're not going to throw away anything. Let's use that and expand and try and think a little bit more broadly around how we could actually completely redesign things to, make a great future for both organizations.
That's great. I'm actually working with a client at the moment who's just did an acquisition in 2020, and throughout this year has been doing exactly that process to try and understand what does the new organization have. We didn't buy it just for the brand. We bought it for the brand and the customers and whatnot, but also starting to lift the curtain and going, well, actually, you know what? It doesn't make sense to have two tech stacks just because we have two brands. Let's bring them together. And when they finally made the decision to say, you know what, I think the technology that's coming across as part of the business that we've bought is actually probably more mature than the one that we're in the process of building. And although we've invested several $1 million and we're only halfway through that build, we're going to stop and throw that away because it makes more sense to move our existing business onto that tech stack. And I can imagine in some businesses that would be, well, no, we bought you, so therefore what we're doing has to be better regardless of taking that learning. So it's pretty exciting to hear that you've got that approach, which I imagine then opens some opportunities to what does your platform strategy look like moving forward and things, which is pretty exciting. So we talked a little bit about tech and tech strategy and how that gets impacted, but now I'm curious to talk about people because, as I said a second ago, any change, particularly around M&A, automatically you've got two groups of people who are like, well, what does that mean for me? What does it mean for my role? And all these sort of things that come up. And I think it's generally probably even more difficult to sort out the people problems than it is to sort out the technical problems in many respects. And you talked about it being a genuine merger and kind of seeking to find the best of both worlds. So I imagine that applies to the people as well. Could you talk to me a little bit about how you're thinking about that challenge and some of the considerations you're having to navigate?
Yeah, so in order, it was really tricky to navigate getting the people from both organisations into the same frame of mind. So how do we create a picture or an anchor that people can continue to go back to that helps them understand what we are at the moment trying to achieve and not getting too far ahead of ourselves? So at the moment, the Trustpower business is focused on separating our generation and CNI business from our Trustpower mass market retail business. And our focus is solely on that. And so we used an analogy around having a stool with three legs. And what we're aiming to do is to have the Trustpower retail business, stand up by itself and two legs of that stool be painted with our beautiful branding colours. And the third leg of that stool for us is the shared services that we need to rely, that we will rely on Mercury for from day one. So they'll be our third stool leg, but really focusing on trying to stand up the Trustpower retail business as a standalone business. And we've sort of used the term like, we're contracting shared services from Mercury. And that's super helpful to, control the scope. So I know that it'd be very easy for all of us, myself included, to get into that. What does merging look like? But, our senior leaders that are moving across to Mercury haven't had an opportunity to talk about strategy. So how can we talk about anything to do with the merging or the future, the future state of these organisations ahead of something that we're not entirely certain of what it is? So we're sort of trying to keep status quo in place. And as such, the approach to change management has really been on minimising change and making it a positive experience for people so that they understand, we're actually starting a new, both organisations are starting fresh and they are going to grow from there into these fantastic new separate organisations, one under the Mercury umbrella and another one for our generation business. And that's getting that message or getting people excited about that message can be quite challenging, but that's the piece that we're working on at the moment. There has been this sense of grief around the separation because it feels like we're breaking up, but we're now sort of moving into that new phase where it can be quite lustful and playful for people, and we're learning something new, starting a new relationship and figuring out what that's about. But minimizing change during this period to go, day one should look relatively the same as it does today for everybody. It's just that we'll have some extra people that we'll be relying upon to do some of the things that we don't, that for individuals or teams that have been separated out to the other organisation.
And so what do you think maybe I'll just go for one. What's been the toughest challenge with people when you think about all that stuff?
So the challenge that we're facing at the moment, I think there are two, and it's based on the phases that we've been through. So the initial challenge was the announcement of the strategic review that led to the sale of our retail business. That was, unbelievably disruptive for people coming out of a year of impact from COVID. I think everybody had sort of taken a breath over Christmas, hoping that 2021 would be less disruptive. And the reality is that we walked back into something that was as disruptive for the people involved as the previous year had been. So that was quite a hard pill for people to swallow, and it created such a swell of uncertainty that it was hard to get a handle on helping people feel comfortable. So some of the key messages that helped up front were everybody is going to have a job. There is going to be no mass layoffs, like some of that stuff to go, we care about you and we will make sure that you are looked after through this journey. That was really helpful. So that was a big challenge that was difficult for the teams to overcome. The one that we are running into at the moment is change fatigue. So we've been on this roller coaster. It's October. We got this announcement in February, and people are exhausted. They are sick to death of hearing about the project that's happening. They don't probably have a great appreciation of the detail of the complexity. So it's sort of this thing that's happening over there, and when it impacts me, I hope somebody tells me about it. But it's challenging for people to pay attention to the change as it's starting to happen, because now we've gone from we've been doing lots and lots of planning, and now we're hitting the go live. So we've got about 3 months worth of, continuous change happening. We've got change requests coming out of our ears every week, and that is getting people to pay attention to the things that they're going to be impacted for, so that they can prepare for them week on week on week, instead of it being something that falls to our support teams that are already overwhelmed, is the challenge that we're coming with at the moment. And we've got, we're working on developing strategies to overcome that, but I think that it's just an acknowledgement that this is going to be the very bumpy part of the ride. We've definitely gone into the outback in our Land Rover, and we're bumping along, and hopefully sometime we'll get to the beach and it's going to be great. But the next period of time, as we move towards the proposed settlement date, is going to be super challenging.
Right. And then I'll change tack, because it wouldn't be Platform Diaries without a platform question. So perhaps, because, you mentioned Salesforce, so I imagine that's just one small cog in a much bigger, complex piece of work. Could you give us a little bit of a sense of the platform landscape that you're sort of having to rationalise?
Yeah, so like any good large corporate organisation, we've got a ton of legacy applications that are part of our retail platform group, and we had planned work already proposed to start trying to redesign what that looks like for us. And so combining that with, we need to be patient, and we're trying to redesign, post the settlement, try to redesign what a good platform roadmap or platform strategy will be for these, joint organizations or a single tech stack. It's really challenging to pause when we know things are sort of on shaky legs already. And so that's, I suppose that's probably some of the challenges we've had to continue to deal with, the ongoing maintenance and upgrading of some of these platforms that we know we need to completely overhaul, but we're now no longer in a position to do that ahead of the settlement. And the settlement has been moved out twice already, the settlement date. So we're just hoping that all things go well for the final hurdle that we need to jump over in November, so that we can get this across the line in February.
It just spawned me to ask a question. I don't imagine you were sitting around in February going, we've got nothing to do and there's no backlog of work and things that we're thinking about, right? And then, this gets sprung on the business about, hey, we're doing something and it's a totally different change of strategy. Was it as simple as, well, business has changed direction, drop the roadmap? Or was it kind of now I've got to do this tricky navigation of force ranking what we absolutely have to do and what we don't? Like, how did you play that out?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had to develop a prioritization and delivery model that allowed us to help business units make good decisions about what they did and didn't need to do. So it came down to a needs thing, because we took half of the resource from our technology team and had to put it onto this project. And the people that have been involved in this project leading up to the announcement of the strategic review have been on this journey for years. And that, I think, is quite a challenging world to move into. There's a very small group of individuals who've been involved in sort of planning and how we're going to get to the point where we can, make this a thing, to, okay, we've got somebody and the offer's been accepted, the rubber's got to hit the road now, start delivering on this. And that, I think that's, an immensely challenging piece of work, because you need far more brains in a room to get a good view of what the effort is and involved to actually go about executing the separation. But there was constraints in place that stopped that from happening early enough. And I don't entirely know. I'm super confident in the team that we have working on this project at the moment, and our ability to get it across the line by February. But I think the effort involved in executing something like this is so significant that you have to be super careful as you go about it, not to just completely burn out your organisation.
No, that's a fair point. And I really appreciate you making the time in the middle of this piece of work, because I think often we talk about hypotheticals being, I'm not in the process of an M&A activity, but this is what you have to think about. Or we go, I'm on the tail end of one and these are my reflections. But it's almost refreshing to have this I'm in the middle of it conversation, and what are you thinking about, and what have you already sort of come up against so far? Sort of based on that, if you're thinking about, if you're in a room full of other execs who are considering or about to approach an M&A, what would be your top 3 tips for them that you think?
Yeah, I don't think that I'm quite yet in a position to be offering a whole lot of advice to other people. I'm very much on this learning journey myself. I've been involved in this project since April, but only sort of in the last 2 months I've taken on a core leadership role. But the learnings that we have had are get the information out early and make decisions that are going to matter quickly. So we've spent some time early on in the project sort of holding off making decisions which impacted our ability to progress. And yes, they were very material decisions and did matter, but prioritizing making those decisions to unblock the project deliverables is really important, and getting the information in front of people and making sure people understand as early as possible. So we had the curtain of silence was only very slowly pulled back, but we sort of needed to go, cool, now everybody can know this information, let's run you through it and make sure that everybody understands, so that there was a shared appreciation of the details of what it is that we're actually trying to undertake. But that helps form people's view and bring them together around, okay, and now we have a shared appreciation of what we are aiming to achieve over this period. But I think that wasn't well known for quite a long time, which delayed our ability to get started. And so the different things that have made the sale delay, or made the completion of the settlement be delayed, is a blessing in disguise, because I don't think that we would have probably got there in a very tidy state if we tried to do it quicker. But at the same time, the impact on your organisation of having something that runs for a really long period of time is quite significant. So you've got to get ahead of it and make sure that you're having those conversations and bringing people along on the journey, making sure they know that there's still light at the end of the tunnel and that they're excited about it, not just feeling like, oh God, thank God I finished that race, I'll never do a half marathon again.
So if I was to distill that, it would be, I'm going to put words in your mouth, but making no decision is worse than making a bad one. Like, just get on with making decisions. Yeah,
absolutely.
And you talk about communicating early, and I feel like if that's the lesson, I often hear about people saying, well, what are we communicating? Because if we don't have a plan and people want detail, and if I give them something, the obvious next step will be, here's my 50 questions, and if you can't answer them, I'm just as nervous as I'm more nervous than if I knew nothing. And this kind of chicken and egg scenario. And I think you kind of described that as, the sooner you start communicating, the sooner you can start moving. And even if you don't have the answers, you'll get closer to getting them if you're moving.
Yeah, and I think we had the debacle of share something, but we know that it will change, or share nothing because we're not sure that this is exactly what will happen. But the overwhelming feedback was, give us anything and tell us that it may change, or tell us that it will change, and that's better than radio silence, because I think the absence of any message is far more disruptive than a message saying that this is the best we can do for now, because this is a very complex.
Yeah, I think in a comms vacuum, it will get filled with something. And if it's not information, it's misinformation, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, giving people an opportunity to talk to somebody, whether it's just people sitting down going, I've got this question, and if the answer is, I don't know that question, but let's write it down so that at a time when it can be answered, we can share it with you. That's enough. People are, quite understanding.
Yeah, no, fair enough. All right, we're up on time. I appreciate you coming to spend some time in your busy schedule with us. If someone's sitting there going, hey, I'm really interested in what Nadia's up to, or I want to learn a little bit more, can they reach out to you? And if so, how should they get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating topic. I'm keen to talk to anybody else who's been through this sort of thing, because I think there's just so many learnings that can be had. But probably the best way for anybody who doesn't know me to reach out is probably on LinkedIn, Nadia Herriott, Herriott. It's a terrible last name. You never say it without having to spell it.
Well, at least it's unique.
Yeah.
Try being Shane Williams. It's always, you're easy to find. So, mate, thanks for your time. And as always, it's good to chat. I hope everyone will get something out of this conversation, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams. For more information or to contact Shane, please visit shanewilliams.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.